We'll keep watching it.
Now to a Fox News alert. You're looking alive at El Paso, Texas, where we're following reports of an active shooter situation. The police department there tweeting a few moments ago that, quote, the scene is still active and warning folks near the Cielo Vista Mall area to steer clear. We're going to continue watching this story as it develops. Leland, as you mentioned earlier, still precious few facts known.
One fact that we're getting right now is we're watching a police officer, and it looks like they are pulling out some of their larger weapons from an unmarked car there at the back of this mall. KTSM, which is the local NBC affiliate, now reporting that 18 people were shot inside the Walmart. Extent of their injuries unknown at the time. As we watch this, and you cover enough of these, you learn to read a little bit of the body language of the police. We don't see anybody running. We don't see weapons at the ready necessarily and up. We don't see more SWAT teams coming in, etc. You wonder at this time if police believe they have part of this contained or at least understand what happened and aren't calling in more units. It's unclear where the Walmart that the NBC station is talking about is in relation to the entrance to the mall that would appear as though we're looking at on our screen. But this situation certainly changing now in the border town of El Paso. This began unfolding at about noon Central Time. So, Jillian, you'd imagine families out shopping. They're on a Saturday afternoon getting groceries in the summer, getting ready for a wonderful weekend. And this mall sits just about halfway between the Mexico-U.S. border in El Paso and the airport.
Looking at the live photos of the parking lot outside of the Walmart and the Cielo Vista Mall area, looks like a lot of cars parked there. You know, middle of the day, a bright, sunny Saturday. You got to think that a lot of families headed to the mall to take care of business, to get outside away from the heat, maybe to take their families there for an afternoon of some fun and shopping. This is certainly not what any of those folks were imagining for today, for this Saturday.
Yeah, we have access to the El Paso police radio tapes. We have some producers listening to those, and we try to do that in these situations. Listen to them, try to glean what information we can, and also sort of check to see what's happened on those tapes before we put them on air. But we're working on those as well. I don't know if we have control over this camera or can talk to the photographer, but sometimes if they could pan a little bit to the left, we don't have any control over this picture. But we saw a number of officers, some appeared to be in pretty casual clothes, shorts and T-shirts with bulletproof vests over them, walking towards the back entrances of this mall. The NBC affiliate reporting just this, that there was 18 people shot. The extent of their injuries is unknown. And obviously, it's going to take a while to figure out how long this could go on before we have more information. We bring back Ted Williams, former D.C. homicide detective and federal agent. Ted, clearly things have changed since we last talked. I don't know if you can see a television, but what do you make of the posture of police? We don't see SWAT teams lining up. We don't see officers and groups running with weapons up and at the ready. The urgency seems to have been pulled back a little bit, although we don't know if this is the main scene.
Well, I'm not actually able to view the scene, but I can tell you this. If you do not see that kind of activity, it could very well be more likely than not that the shooter or shooters are down. I say that not having as much information as I would like to have, but normally, if in fact it was still a very active scene, you would find the SWAT teams in place, and it appears as though law enforcement seems to be in a lax state from what you've been able to see and glean. So therefore, it's more likely than not that the law enforcement on that scene are now in control of that scene. And but the tragedy is, from what I've been told, the amount of people who are alleged to have been shot, that's clearly a tragedy.
So, Ted, KTSM is reporting that the shooter, they're confirming the shooter shot at 18 people. What does that number mean to you? What does it tell you?
Oh, my God. It sounds like it been, and I'm left to speculate, but it sounds like it could very well have come from a semi-automatic weapon, because it's very difficult, even in a store like Walmart, to shoot that many people, if that many people have been shot.
Ted, we're up against the top of the hour now, noon Mountain Time in El Paso, Texas, where we understand that, at least according to our affiliates, 18 people have been shot inside a local Walmart there on a Sunday morning, when so many people headed out with their families this morning and with their loved ones to get ready for the weekend and to do their weekly shopping. We're going to continue to follow the news and the developments from New York.
We are following breaking news out of El Paso. There are reports of an active shooter near a mall. Police also confirming the situation on Twitter, saying, quote, active shooting, stay away from Cielo Vista Mall area. Scene is still active. Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's News headquarters on a very busy Saturday afternoon. I'm Jillian Mealy.
I'm Rob Schmidt. Eric and Arthel both off today, and the first reports of gunfire came in at around 11 o'clock in the morning local time in El Paso, Texas. Local media is reporting that shots were fired inside of a Walmart that's in this same general area right here. As you can see, the Cielo Vista Mall. As we take a full picture here, officers have shut down this entire area. You can see how active it is. Police in big cities, including here in New York, say they are watching this situation very closely. To get more into this and get some analysis here, we're going to go to Dr. Darren Porcher, former NYPD lieutenant, U.S. Army veteran, and law enforcement analyst. Darren, are you with us there?
Oh, now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
We got you there,
right.
yeah. As you take a look at the screen here, you can see the mall. You can see a lot of police activity. You can see some people tucked into the corner here in the shade here on the left side of the screen. What exactly are police doing at this point? We're just trying to get some analysis from somebody that would know what the move is at this early stage.
Well, what's happening right now is you have different sets. You have perimeters being established. You have a hot zone, you have a warm zone, and a cold zone. The hot zone is actually where the shooting occurred. So this is where you're going to have officers with heavy vests, the automatic weapons, things to that effect. These are the officers that are more than likely going to, if possible, engage the suspect. Then you're going to have a warm zone. The war zone is going to be maybe a couple of feet outside of it. Those officers that are in the warm zone are still susceptible to receiving gunfire or even possibly firing their weapons as a result of it. And then you have the cold zone. When I speak to the cold zone, this is what you see right now on the camera. You see the officers, you see the police cars outside, and the primary focus here is to maintain the perimeter, not let people enter that mall. Traffic duties, things to that effect. So those are the three zones that we have set up right now. We can't see what's occurring internally in the hot zone, and that's intentional because by all means, we don't want to alert the shooter as to what our positioning is in connection with this incident. But right now, it appears to be a horrific incident, and the police are applying their due diligence moving forward.
Dr. Porcher, it's Jillian here. We do have a report of 18 people shot. Information is still coming in. We are gathering information as we speak right now. You mentioned traffic. This area is literally right off of I-10, actually not too far from the airport there. So what does that tell you? It's in a shopping center. You have the mall. You have other big box stores like the Walmart. That's where we're hearing this happened. We don't know if it was inside the Walmart, outside the Walmart. But this is a Saturday afternoon, Dr. Porcher, when people are out running their errands.
You know, it's interesting. When I was on active duty in the military, I was stationed in Texas, and I'm quite familiar with this particular area where the incident is. And you do have a large pedestrian and vehicular traffic zone at this particular mall. So it's going to, and coupled with this being a weekend, on a Saturday, you have less resources that are working. So more than likely, the El Paso Police Department is going to bring in, they're going to put out a mobilization, so to speak, for additional officers that are off duty to come on duty. In addition to that, more than likely, the ATF is going to probably bridge a partnership with the El Paso Police Department, coupled with the Texas State Troopers, and that assemblances of those three organizations or those three units are going to assist with the traffic moving forward. Because This is a heavy pedestrian and vehicular traffic zone going into this mall. We're looking at 18 people that are possibly shot. That's a catastrophic incident, to say the least. And it's just going to require a mountainous level of resources to just kind of sort through, keep people back, but at the same token, enable the officers to effectively get to and interdict the shooter as a result.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the 18 people shot is just from local media reports. We do not have that confirmed here at Fox News. We also do understand at this point the ATF is en route to this scene, and I'm sure a lot of other federal enforcement agencies will be heading in as the police are just trying to get a hold of what's going on. We don't even know if the shooter is in custody, and we don't really even know at this point if there is a shooter. I mean, in a lot of cases, you don't know anything, and sometimes these initial reports can be very sketchy. But Dr. Porcher, people talk about this all the time. They see things like this on television. They see these active shooting scenes. What do you tell people when they ask you, what should I do if I'm at the mall or I'm at the store and I start hearing gunshots? What's the move you need to make?
The first thing that you want to do is you want to run, hide, you want to run, seek cover, and then dial 911. Those are the three steps. You want to get away from this as quickly as possible. If you don't have the ability to get away from it, you want to, at minimum, seek a level of cover. It could be something such as a table, it can be a wall, etc. There's a multitude of different places that you can seek cover in a place like a mall such as this, concrete columns, etc. And then you make the call for 911 to bring in the additional resources, because we need to get the boots on the ground to effectively interdict the shooter.
Absolutely.
But don't think in terms of trying to, at this stage, don't think in terms of how to get out of the place, because a lot of people get lost and look, I need to make my way out of this place as quickly as possible. That shouldn't be your first step. Your first step would be to run and seek cover. And while you're safely behind cover, that's when you can navigate your next move.
Dr. Porcher, I want to jump in here because, as Rob just mentioned, we did get news that ATF is on its way to the scene. This is a tweet from ATF Dallas that I'm reading right now, and it says, quote, breaking ATF is en route to assist the El Paso police at the scene of a reported shooting in the area of this mall that we mentioned. And then it goes on to say, please stay away from the area and refrain from posting first responder activity on social media. That line in particular, what do you read of that? Please refrain from posting first responder activity on social media. What does that tell you about the possibility of what's going on with this alleged shooter?
Well, right now, an assessment is being done. You're going to have special operations officers that are, quote-unquote, boots on the ground. Those are the people that have the long guns, heavy vests, helmets, etc. We don't want to reveal or introduce their placement as to where they're located, be it in this Walmart or in another store, because oftentimes the shooter, he or her, because we don't know if this is a male or female, they can very well be using their cell phone and watching television to assess the positioning of the first responders as a result of that.
Dr. Porcher, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. Do you have a monitor in front of you? Can you see this new video that we're showing on TV right now?
Yes. What I see right now is I see an officer with a helmet trying to seat a possible victim. So I can see it. And so right now, what they're doing, the officers on the scene that are speaking with those victims, they're trying to assess the placement of where the shooter is at the location.
And that video looked like it was from inside a Sam's Club, which is also in that same shopping center.
Right, but that victim can be a formidable component of intelligence as to where is the shooter located, how many shooters are there, where did the shooter enter, what is the shooter wearing. These are germane components for first responders to effectively get to the shooter and neutralize the situation accordingly.
Doctor, when you go into this, I mean, does the weaponry of the suspect in a case like this, does this change the way police respond to this? As we take another look, and yeah, that does look like a Costco type place or a Sam's Club type place, and they're carrying somebody out on a cart there. A woman clearly very shaken up, not sure if she's injured or not. She's pointing at something.
You know, sometimes you get injured when you're trying to run away from a scary scene.
Yeah. Does that change anything when police, if police have an indication that there's an automatic weapon versus you know, maybe a pistol? Does that change the way they respond, or is it just you just go in no matter what? You just go right in.
Depending upon the weapons that are used by the subject, that's going to determine what the officers bring in. So I give you an example. Let's say hypothetically the shooter is someone that's in possession of an assault rifle or a .223 caliber, something to that effect. What the police would do in a situation like that is they would bring in what we refer to as a ballistic shield. And that ballistic shield, one of those rolling ballistic shields, would effectively prevent the officers from getting shot. And so it's a rolling, I want to say it's approximately maybe 5 to 6 feet high. It rolls in, and it'll be able to take rounds from something like a .223. Now, if this is something, a handgun, something to that effect, we may not need that level of fortification moving in. But the truth of the matter is,
Doctor, let me just cut you off here for a second, as we see a number of people being escorted out of the mall, just kind of slowly making their way, hopefully, to their cars. We do want to
bring in Garrett Tenney right now, who is live at the scene. Garrett just got onto the scene. And Garrett, I'm not sure if you're seeing what we're seeing with people. This is the most activity we've seen in front of this camera in the last few minutes anyway, of people in this parking lot.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly where a camera is set up. I can tell you I am in front of the Sam's Club right now, which is just adjacent to that Walmart. I am looking at the front of the Walmart store right now, and I'm actually standing where I'm told was the initial triage area that they were bringing the victims from Walmart over to here. There's still a couple of bandages here that are soaked in blood that are still left on the ground. The victims are no longer here, but I can tell you in the few minutes since I've gotten here, when I walked up, I saw a young man that was crying into an older man's shoulder, and I asked him, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? Do you have family inside?" And he told me, "My mom is dead."
Oh, gosh.
Jesus.
He said that he was in the parking lot. She had just walked inside, and that he heard the shots. As soon as he heard the shots, he said he jumped out of his car, ran inside, and he said when he got there, it was horrific. He and the older man that he was with, I don't know if it was his father, but they said they saw bodies that were lying on the ground. They saw lots of blood. They saw brains, and his mom was dead. And he was taken away to talk to police. A few minutes later, I spoke to another gentleman who was coming from Walmart, and he told me that he was at the back of the parking lot with his mother. They had just pulled in and gotten out of their car when the gunmen in the parking lot opened fire and started shooting. He described it as, in his words, a semi-automatic weapon. Again, these are not confirmed reports. These are what witnesses are saying. But he said he just heard pop, pop, pop. And he said as soon as it happened, it took him a moment to realize what was happening. He rushed his mom back to the car, threw her in there. They tried to drive to get out of the parking lot, but they couldn't because the only way out was in the direction of the gunman. So they just parked in the far back of the parking lot, crouched down and hid in their car. The man then, when he didn't hear any more shots outside, he started working his way through the parking lot towards the front of the Walmart to try to help some of those people that he said had been shot outside the store. These are just some of the initial reports that we are hearing from people that were here when this shooting immediately happened. You can see on that camera, I'm sure, because all around this Walmart, there is such an extremely heavy police presence. You have SWAT units that are here in full riot gear, or with the helmets and the vests. Their weapons are drawn as they're walking in and out. I can tell you, though, in sense of their demeanor, they're not walking around with their guns raised as if this is still an ongoing situation. We have seen some people slowly being brought out from the Walmart, people that, presumptively were inside hiding when the shooting began and are still working their way out to make sure that everything is safe inside and that they're able to find everyone in there and bring them as they work their way out. When we got here, though, as I was walking down this hill to the front of the store, there was a long, long line of fire crews and medics that were walking up the hill. I would say probably 30 that walked past me on their way. So if they are leaving the scene, it appears that the worst of the injuries, those who were severely injured or killed, they have been already treated here and have been taken elsewhere for treatment, because a lot of them were moving out of the scene to allow more police to come in here as this investigation starts to get underway. Again, we're just now about an hour from when these reports initially came in, still a very active scene here. And I'm going to keep trying to talk to folks as they work their way out and keep y'all updated as we learn more.
Garrett, keep doing that. That's some of those details are just terrific we're hearing there. Let's update our viewers if you're just now tuning in. This is El Paso, Texas, on the east side of the city, near the airport there in El Paso. This is the Cielo Vista Mall. There's a Walmart there, there's a Sam's Club there, and there's been an active shooting there sometime around 11 o'clock in the morning local time. That's Mountain Time in El Paso. Reports from local media say that as many as 18 people have been shot. A witness has told our own Garrett Tenney that his mother was shot and killed in this active shooting. Just a horrifying description there. And police, of course, have surrounded this place. We've been watching video right there on the left side now, full screen, of people being evacuated. A lot of, look like a lot of teenagers probably hanging out on the mall on a Saturday, and just a horrific scene. Jillian.
We're going to bring in Dr. Darren Porcher again, who has been with us on the line for the last few minutes. He's in our New York studios. And Dr. Porcher, I'm sure you were listening to the reports that Garrett Tenney was giving us live from that scene, just about the triage that was going on at the Sam's Club. He said that he was told anyway from people who were there on the scene that the person who started shooting in the parking lot, and people couldn't escape because the only way out was to go in the direction of the shooter.
Right, that appears to be the case. What the shooter has established is this is a target-rich environment. And so what he's doing is, a case in point, like when I heard the semi-automatic weapon, that sounds sound for what the carnage is as we look at 18 people shot. And we have to take into consideration, we have two philosophies in law enforcement. You can either evacuate or shelter in place. But when a shooter does something like this, he takes away from one of those options. And one of the things that I'm wondering is, what is the shooter's ideology? First, we need to contain the situation. We need to neutralize the shooter. That's absolute. And secondly, I would like to take this person into custody to find out, to gain some intelligence, to make this a teachable moment moving forward for law enforcement, how we move into these types of instances. I mean, I can't explain to you how terrible this is for these people at this time at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Like I mentioned, I've lived in Texas, and I know what it's like at this particular mall at that time. And the truth of the matter is, fortunately, ATF is coming in to assist, but we also have those two additional components of the El Paso PD and the Texas state troopers that are converging on the scene. It's just a matter of time before this person is either neutralized or taken into custody. Let's hope no further carnage happens as a result.
Dr. Porcher, I apologize for interrupting you, but we're looking at a tweet right now from just a few minutes ago from the El Paso Police Department, and this is a quote from 5 minutes ago. It says, "Scene is still active. We have multiple reports of multiple shooters. Please avoid area. Police conducting search of a very large area." You hear that from police, that there's possibly multiple shooters.
I mean, that sends chills down the spine of law enforcement. This is a very large area. And when I mentioned setting up these perimeters, the hot zone, cold zone, and warm zone, it takes forces to go in and secure a zone like this. Because especially on a Saturday, you're only going to have limited resources to begin with going into something like this. But when we talk about several shooters with automatic weapons, it kind of reminds me of years ago, we had a bank robbery that happened in Los Angeles where we had two armed shooters with automatic weapons. And it just took them a long time to get this thing under control. And then another thing that we have to take in consideration, if we go back to the Nicholas Cruz shooting in Florida, in Parkland, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Nicholas Cruz was able to walk out of there, and he was caught at a later point in time in that day. Law enforcement does not want that to happen. We do not want this person to leave the scene and possibly commit to further carnage at another location. So therefore, they need to apply their due diligence in accordance with taking these shooters into custody.
Dr. Porter, we just saw a number of people be evacuated from some part of this mall. Not sure how close they are to where the shooting is happening, but would you see that happening before the shooters were contained or were taken down? Would you see evacuations like that occurring? I'm trying to get an indication of whether or not they've got this in any kind of control.
Well, like I mentioned, because of the massive complex that that the officers are converging on, they just don't have the ability to I want to say choke these points whereas people are coming out. So they just may not have the control. And we don't want the wrong person coming out and committing to additional carnage. So it's just going to take some time to get in there. This is something that happens really quick. And I go back to years ago, we had officers, I want to say the uniformed officers, the first thing that they did was they got on the scene and they kind of held the fort until the special operations troops came in. We've now since switched the pendulum over and we've trained officers as first responders to come in and directly interdict the threat. And that appears to be what's going on here, as I see on this video. But it goes back to those victims that we have been shot at the scene. They're going to prove to be a germane component of intelligence for the officers to understand where these particular shooters are in this complex. Coupled with if the officers can get a live feed on the video into that complex, that would be a tremendous enhancement in their ability to get in and get to the shooter. Oftentimes, I'll give you an example here in New York City, the NYPD has the ability to go directly into the feeds of a lot of these businesses or the street cams. If they have that same ability in Texas, it should be something that ends relatively soon, because we need some eyes into the location to tell us where the shooter's located.
Well, right, and also, I mean, to be clear, we don't know the type of weapon that was used. That was a report that we got from one of the eyewitnesses from Garrett Tenney. So I just want to make that point. No, we don't know exactly what type of weapon was used. But you talk about security, you talk about getting some of this video, police getting their hands on this video. You're at a mall, right? This is a mall. This is a massive parking lot. Every single person watching this program has been to one of these, type shopping centers where you have a million businesses all there at once. You also have I-10. You also have the airport not too far distance away. So you talk about security cameras in the parking lot, security cameras at these stores, possible Department of Transportation cameras on the highway. So it would appear anyway, from an outsider's perspective, Dr. Porcher, that police getting their hands on video should be a possibility.
It should be. And like I said, we need to keep our fingers crossed, because I don't know what their resources are in the El Paso Police Department. But if that happens, it'd be much easier for the officers to get in and contain the threat. But bigger than that, we need the resources from the officers coming in. As we mentioned, ATF is coming in, and that would be an assistance. But going back to the weapon that's been used here, when we have 18 people shot, more than likely there's either fully automatic or semi-automatic rifle that's on the scene.
That's a lot of victims.
Right.
Doctor,
a handgun
hang loose for us for just 1 second, Doctor, because we're going to bring in an eyewitness there at the scene who's on the phone with us, Vanessa Sines. Vanessa, if you can hear me, first off, I hope you're okay, and tell us what you saw.
Yes, we're doing much better now. My mother and I and my 1-year-old son, we were driving into the parking lot. We were doing our weekly grocery shopping. As I was driving in, I was looking for a parking lot, and all of a sudden you heard what sounded like fireworks, really loud fireworks. So I started looking to see where the sound, I started hearing to see where the sound was coming from, and I saw a couple of people in front of the Walmart. One man looked like he was dancing, and I thought that was kind of odd. And the pops, you could just hear the pops, one right after another. And at that point, as I was turning, I saw a lady. It seemed she was coming out of Walmart, heading to her car. So she had her groceries in her car, and I saw her just fall. And that seemed, my mom said, wait a minute, those aren't fireworks. Go, just go. And I started driving. I had to be careful because there were people running, kids running to their cars, parents with kids just trying to look for cover. And so I had to be careful as I drove off. At that point, the pops are just still going. I probably heard anywhere from 15 to 20 pops. I made it around to exit towards the back of the Walmart instead of getting on the highway, which I thought would be easier since it's my neighborhood and I know it better. The so I turned around and I saw this man dressed in a black T-shirt with cargo pants, carrying what seemed to be a rifle, just pointing at people and just shooting straight at them. I saw about 3 or 4 just fall to the ground, and I thought, oh, my God. And I was at a stop sign, so there's other cars trying to get out, so I had to be very careful. So the last thing I saw was him walking into the Walmart, very nonchalant, like he was on a mission.
So Vanessa, okay, so this man, I just want to go over these details that you saw one more time. You saw one man, correct? Because we are hearing reports that there were potentially multiple shooters. So you saw one man in a black shirt and cargo pants with what appeared to be a weapon, and then you saw that person actually walk into the Walmart. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you describe him any further than that? Any other details about him that you saw?
Yes, I was pretty far away, but I could still see him. Like I mentioned, he was wearing a black T-shirt, camel-colored cargo pants. He was wearing something to cover his ears, I'm assuming because of the noise, the bullets, like headphones or really thick ones. He was carrying a dart rifle, and he was just pointing at people and just shooting. And, yeah, the last thing I saw, he shot somebody that was in a corner, and he just picked up the rifle and just walked into Walmart.
Was his face covered?
No, it wasn't. He had, but the only thing that he had on was the earmuffs and, black dark hair. He was probably, I'm not sure, I'm assuming 5'10", 5'11", maybe late 30s, maybe. I couldn't really see his face, but it was not covered.
And did you say you saw a woman get shot in the parking lot and fall as she was pushing her grocery cart out of the Walmart? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir, I did. And that's when I thought, okay, these aren't fireworks. And that's when I drove around, that's when I actually saw more people fall.
Vanessa,
like he was just shooting randomly. It wasn't to any particular person. It was just anyone that would cross paths.
Vanessa, you said when we first got you on the phone here that you had your 1-year-old child in the car with you. What goes through your mind when that happens and you know that you have a 1-year-old in your car that you have to protect?
You hear it on the news and you feel for the families and you feel for the people that actually witness it, but to actually know that, that was me with my mom and my son, I count my blessings. It's pretty sad to know that there's certain people that aren't going to go home today.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa, I can hear it in your voice. You're obviously you're tearing up and you're shaken up after all this, and I can only imagine. I'm sorry you had to witness such a thing.
Yeah.
But our condolences to you, and I'm glad at least you got out of there safe with your family.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're going to bring back in Dr. Porcher, who just listened to that entire interview with us. Doctor, what did you make of that?
Well, one of the things that she introduced was a description of the shooter. That's huge, because when we're going into a massive complex such as this mall, the officers that are responding want to have some idea of what they're looking for outside of shots, just shots being fired. Just based on the way that this individual is dressed, that should be an indicator to, this guy's dressed in like these types of pants, black shirt, he's wearing earmuffs to protect himself, to protect his ears from the shots that he hears in the complex. That's going to actually help officers a lot in making the identification. But like I mentioned to you before, we should have a feed up, a video feed that's showing officers where this person is located at this time. The victims are at this stage our most essential component of intelligence. And so, granted, we have these people that are shot. The number one thing on these officers' mind is we need to get this guy, we need to stop this threat as quickly and as safely as possible. And if it requires us taking down the shooter, so be it. There are innocent people that are in this mall that are being slaughtered as a result of the shooter's ideology. And we need to get this done, and we need to get it done now.
Dr. Porcher, you've been on the air with the two of us, and we've we've had this conversation before, unfortunately, and I think, you know, it's when this happens again, you take a step back and you don't even know what to think anymore. I mean, here we are sitting here on a Saturday. It is 12:30 in the afternoon in El Paso, Texas. This happened around 11 a.m. when people are out just running their errands, minding their business, getting their stuff done on what appears to be a sunny Saturday afternoon. I mean, Dr. Porcher, where do we go from here? We're talking about it again.
Unfortunately, this is becoming more so the new normal. So, and you know, I give you an example, a contrast and comparison of a place like Israel. This is, in terms of terrorism in Israel, they prepare their citizens accordingly for these types of horrific offenses. Since 9/11, there's been a seismic shift in law enforcement in the United States, where we're now focusing on not just international terrorism, but domestic terrorism as well. And this is clearly an example of domestic terrorism. Therefore, we as law enforcement professionals need to put in place the proper fortifications, exit drills, things to that effect, to ensure that if these things do occur, we want to get the people out of there as safely as possible, and we need to get the professionals, meaning the law enforcement agencies, into this place as quick as possible so they can eradicate this threat. This is the world that we live in, and we need to be fit for the challenge. And I believe present-day law enforcement is fit for the challenge.
Yeah, Doctor, you know, you start to wonder, I mean, people think about this kind of stuff now. You know, it's one of those things where it does become a part of the reality, and people start to wonder, am I going to be in a situation like this? And you wonder, do you need to take some kind of a training so that you can be somebody that can help in a situation like this? I think about it sometimes when I'm at a big event. What happens if somebody starts getting, you know, if somebody starts firing? You know, it would be helpful for more people to know some of these basic, you know, first responder tips, you know, how to stop bleeding, how to, you know, keep people calm.
I mean, that works great, but I think the best thing that civilians, the common citizen, can do is dial 911. And when you dial 911, you want to give an assessment that is sound as to what is the situation that law enforcement will face when they enter the particular location. But outside of this, when we look from an exponential perspective, we need to think about when these threats come up. When we make an assessment of someone that is embarking upon rhetoric, be either online or in public circles, we want to alert law enforcement that, hey, this is an individual that has a propensity to commit to these types of horrific acts. I go back to what happened with Nicholas Cruz in Parkland, Florida. People said that, look, they weren't surprised that he did something like this. There were numerous instances where his officers responded to Nicholas Cruz's residence, and he had a firearm, and the firearm was never removed. But the onus is on law enforcement to stay abreast to these threats to these threats that people make, so they can effectively sit down with these people and make these assessments that, hey, look, this is a person, we need to either remove their firearm or take them into custody. So we live in a country we have 360 million people. 360 million people outweighs the number of perpetrators or gunmen that we have in the United States.
Dr. Porcher,
therefore, yes.
Can you hang on for a second, because we have another person on the phone that we're going to bring in right now. We'll come back to you in a few minutes. So for now, let's bring in Bernard Zapor, who's a former special agent in charge of the ATF. And Bernard, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, we do know that ATF is en route to the scene. What are they going to do once they get there? What's the first task?
It is unfortunate, and the fact that this is happening again and will happen again. ATF's role when they respond to the scene is going to be support the local law enforcement. They're going to provide a number of sort of immediate intelligence information that will paint a picture in retrospect of the gunman because of the life of the firearm. That's one thing. Additionally, they're going to bring in resources to incident command and management of the scene to help the local law enforcement deal with the fact they have to transport triage and do all the public safety services that have to happen and give them a big relief on the investigative aspect of this. That's sort of their initial touch.
Yeah. Just to update our viewers who are just joining us here. It's 2:32 here on the East Coast. It's 12:32 in El Paso, Texas, where we have reports of multiple people shot. Local media reporting as many as 18 people shot at a mall, the Cielo Vista Mall, which also contains a Walmart and a Sam's Club on the nearby parts of the property. And we believe the shooting, from eyewitnesses, which we have heard from, began outside of the Walmart and then quite possibly went inside. We have one witness who told us that she saw a shooter wearing black and cargo pants and carrying a rifle and firing off multiple rounds right in front of a Walmart and then moving inside. We had another eyewitness tell our own Garrett Tenney that his mother was killed by the gunman. Garrett caught up with him right outside of the mall right after this all happened when he got there to the scene. Sir, just tell us, when you see stories like this happen again and again and again, how does that make you feel as a member of the ATF?
Well, we're also looking into it as this is societal damage.
Yeah.
We have a mass narcissism happening in our country. It's almost driven by a need for adoration. I hate to use the old term of copycat, but people can obviously see there's a self-gratification in the attention that this type of mass homicide creates. There are a number of things as a society we have to be aware of and anticipate. Number one is, let's assume these events are going to take place. And if that's the case, then every single person needs to go through run, hide, fight training. They need to know that you might be presented with an option. You might not have all three, but you might have the option of running, hiding, or fighting in its different variations. The other thing is a very simple, and hospitals teach this for free, is a stop the bleed training. It's the first 3 minutes that's going to save somebody's life before EMS gets there. There's a very dramatic video that you're broadcasting right now of the police officer who's there with an M4 assault rifle and a riot helmet. He's there to engage a shooter. That part is stopped, and now he's applying a tourniquet to a standard wounded woman. That's the new norm here. But as a society, those measures we can take ourselves, in addition to addressing this sociopathy and this need for adoration through murder.
You talk about the societal damage, as you called it, this mass narcissism. I'm curious, what do you think we need to do to stop that? Can we at this point?
I think, obviously, there's a larger mental health aspect here. It's been discussed every time these things have taken place, all the way back to 1998 with Columbine. And obviously, recognizing somebody's potential and having engagement with them is not necessarily stopping these acts. In terms of a larger, broader recognition of this societal norm, we're going to have to take a deep look at this. This is a combination of mental health professionals, academia, society, leadership, churches, places of worship, to look at why are we trending this way? What is the need here for people to find this recognition and not recognition in faith or love of family or some other greater, higher purpose?
A lot of people talk about, everybody wants to blame something, right? And a lot of people in this country think that guns are the problem here. It sounds to me like you think this is a mental health issue.
I do think it's a mental health issue. The firearm reality in the United States is there are so many here, they're not going away.
Yeah.
They're available. The Supreme Court has spoke to the Second Amendment. It's a tool of the trade for this type of issue. The bigger issue here is the causation. And causation is not the existence of the firearm necessarily, it's the use. The firearm perpetuates in the ability to do this so quickly. I mean, if you look at our preceding shooting, right, in the Garlic Festival in California, law enforcement engaged and stopped the shooter under 2 minutes, which is amazing. That Garlic Festival had prepared, they had armed law enforcement there for this event, but there still was casualties. You look at an active shooter if you take a aggregate of a 4-minute response of law enforcement responding, because law enforcement has a singular objective when they get the call for an active shooter. That is to stop the shooter. If there's only one officer that arrives, he or she is not waiting for backup. They're going to the place of fire and threat to stop it. But even in that time gap, we have to save ourselves through training and then the broader issue of why are we doing this.
So details are still coming in at this point. This obviously happened just in the last few hours. What we do know from eyewitnesses anyway is that this shooting happened in the parking lot outside of a Walmart, and then the gunman, again, according to witnesses, made his way inside the Walmart. Now, the video that we've seen that's come in, again, just more information and more videos starting to come in, and our reporting from Garrett Tenney on the scene is that the Sam's Club, which is also in that, general shopping area, if you will, that area parking lot, that the Sam's Club was used as a triage. So you look at that video that's on the bottom corner of your screen right now, and that's in the Sam's Club. That's where they are triaging victims. So at this point, we don't know any information about the shooter. We did hear that it was a man wearing a black T-shirt and cargo pants. That is from an eyewitness. That is not from police, again. We don't know the status of the shooter or shooters at this point. The last thing that we heard from the El Paso Police Department 27 minutes ago was that the scene is still active, that there were multiple reports of multiple shooters. So we don't have much to go off of. But, what are police doing right now that you can tell us at this point?
I think there's two takeaways that we can look at this event right now and, say, the preceding event in California. Even though they had the shooter down, they did not call the scene secure because they didn't know if there was more than one. They had engaged with one, but until they know that there's not another one, they are still searching for the potential of another shooter. When you approach a mass casualty scene such as this, it's almost imperceptible that one person could kill 18 people within a matter of several minutes. And so there's going to be an assumption. It's going to be very slow for law enforcement to call the scene secure until they have 100% confidence that whoever they have stopped, if they've stopped somebody, is all that's involved. Yeah. So the primary function that's going on for them right now is ensuring that there's no further threat. The simultaneous process is the triage of victims, the evacuation of the non-wounded, and trying to process the fact that you're going to have mass casualties going to hospitals needing medical care. And as demonstrated in the Las Vegas shooting, people have to be triaged on scene. There's not going to be even an opportunity to transport them all necessarily at one time to trauma centers if they need it. So the triage that's happening there from trained medical personnel, there's, I'm sure, in this amongst the customers there, that you're going to have nurses, you're going to have EMTs and firefighters and people that are providing care. They're switching their role of shopping on Saturday with their family to saving somebody's life. Those are the main processes that would be happening right now.
It's interesting what you said about the idea that there's always the potential of multiple shooters, and you really can't rule it out until you really know for sure, because we're looking at now, it's been over an hour and a half probably since this call came in, and one would think the response time was a couple minutes at worst, and you would just assume at this point that police would have engaged whoever or whomever was involved in this, and you would think that you would assume that there would be some kind of a resolution at this point. And what you're saying is there may very well be, but until police know 100% for sure that there's not more than one, because El Paso police did say that they had multiple reports that there were multiple shooters. But if there's not, if there's just one, that person may very well already be dead, but they still can't say the scene's clear until they 100% know, just like we saw in Northern California.
That's accurate. And, unfortunately, and this is a fear that others have, when you look at bombings in the United States, one of the unique bombings of Eric Rudolph was that he planted, this was the Atlanta 1996 Olympics park bombing, he planted a second device. And when he put abortion clinic bombing, he put a second device for the purposes of killing responding law enforcement first responders. So you could anticipate, I would say, potentially, that a shooting event could happen where you have a single shooter that goes in, does this, they've given their life for this purpose, they know they're going to die, then you have the response, and then a second shooter comes in. Law enforcement is thinking in terms of that aspect, and until they completely feel confident that there's not a threat, they are not going to call this thing secure.
Bernard Zapor, thank you so much for joining us. Former Special Agent in Charge, ATF. We really appreciate your time, again, unfortunately under these circumstances, but thank you very much. Right now, we actually do want to hear, we have a sound clip from a witness at the scene. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
I saw people see him. Like, what is it? And then as soon as we started realizing, it was just chaos. It was chaos. People started running all over the place, and it's the most horrific thing. I've ever seen. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I got to go. I'm a witness.
You got inside? What was it like inside?
I didn't get inside, man. I was helping people up in front. Unfortunately, we lost one gentleman there.
There was only one shooter?
Yes, sir, that I saw. I only saw one shooter.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in Dr. Darren Forcher.